Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. I'm Deb Kalidas with PODS, and we have the fantastic Jeff Allen of Esri with us. All right. We're just hanging out for another minute or so, letting wonderful people such as yourself enter in as we're going to be talking about driving business value, quantifying ROI from GIS and PODS investments. Yeah, we've made it to March, Jeff. It's exciting.
I know. Looking forward to St. Patrick's Day here in Chicago for the first time.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Good times with everything. And as always, thank you so much for everyone who has registered. This will be a recording that goes up on the PODS YouTube and PODS website for lots of sharing. So when you hear and listen and see those tidbits that are like, oh my goodness, there's a wonderful replay. We understand people in their daily work schedule that taking time out for something like this, you might have us up on a monitor somewhere, might be in the corner listening, and we just appreciate your time because we know it's valuable in all ways. Well, we've hit the top of the hour, and I know people will continue coming in along the way. So again, my name is Deb Kalidas. I am part of the marketing communications here at PODS. Monique is traveling today, which is wonderful. So it gives us a chance to be together. And Jeff, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll dig into a couple introductory slides?
absolutely. Jeff Allen from Esri. I'm the global pipeline practice lead here. Been at Esri 9 years now, if you believe it. But been around the pipeline GIS industry my whole career. So really excited to have the opportunity today to talk about something a little less technical, a little more business focused.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Jeff, if you can go ahead and take us to that first slide here, we're going to talk about the agenda and a safety moment. What I have loved not being initially part of the oil and gas community is understanding the importance of these safety moments. Very proud. I took part in things yesterday and I had my chimney cleaned. So, the safety moment of today is if you are like me in the Northeast or somewhere where you have, even if it's a furnace or something else, please make sure you keep up with the regular schedule because now with technology, they put a camera up there, you get a before and after, same with duct cleaning and things like that. And it's amazing what collects. So please take that moment to make sure that your household is safe, whether you're there or not there. These are the things that can impact. So podcasts, if this is your first podcast or your 12th, welcome. You can go to pods.org and click on podcast at any time and see the collection of what we've been doing for 2 years now. Wonderfully with our partners, our gold sponsors and principal partners such as Esri, we're able to create really wonderfully valuable content for you, our members, and all that we have going on. So we're so excited to have Esri and Jeff here with us today. And that is indeed, Esri is a principal partner of ours. We are membership based, we are nonprofit. And with that, we are very thankful for our sponsors that allow us to provide these things for free for you as part of your membership. And we know there is a payment to that, but let me tell you that the networking and the value and the learning is way more than anything that can be expected in dollar price. So our goals for today are that you learn something. We want you to be able to put questions in the chat that Jeff will be able to address at the end of our time together. We want you to be able to take a look at who else is here and go, wow, I've been meaning to get a hold of David, or, oh, wow, Tony is great. I haven't talked to him in a while. Connect afterwards, have conversations, post on LinkedIn for us that you were a part of this. We love being able to do that. So defining ROI is the topic today, and I'll let Jeff go in about that. Hard and soft benefits, where to look, and communicating to management. So we're very excited. And, high-performing businesses are successful because they make smart decisions about when and where they allocate available resources. We're excited to hear Jeff with that. So go ahead to the next slide, Jeff. Pods, if this is your first time with us, welcome. We are the industry standard and community for efficient pipeline data management. We are global and growing in our membership. And with each membership, it's an opportunity as an organization to welcome one another, learn, and have business opportunities, and to continue just, again, the standard and community for that pipeline data management, which means safety globally. We need to update our pinpoints on this map because we've got quite a few that we'll be able to do so. Go ahead, Jeff, with the next one. All right. So the data model benefits, it is open Esri compatible platform. The database architecture for linear reference database, oh my goodness, we have experts on this. If you want to talk, we have those that are willing and welcome at any time, especially as it digs into the standardizes and modernizes data management and reporting. This is crucial for all partners and producers, all the different service providers that we have that are part of this process, and all those end users at the end. It's a business risk compliance and decision-making tool, and we have a pipe-centric approach to managing pipeline data in a single data repository. It's the worst when you have to search from data in multiple places, the same as with your pipelines. So we're here to discuss the benefits at any time. And what's exciting is we've got lots of events coming up. If you want to go to the next slide, Jeff. It is a reflection of where we've been in January and February and March. We are right at that March 5th date right now, and look at all that is to come. Please head over to pods.org, register for the Spring Forum, please, on April 28th, after you've joined us for Petro IT's podcast on April 9th. So if you haven't registered for that, definitely head over to pods.org right now to do so. But we go right from the Spring Forum to Esri Urgis in there. There's our booth number. Then we immediately head to Colorado, to then Berlin, to everything. Oh my goodness. What's great about pods.org is it is the repository of a fantastic calendar. We try to lay out every single event either that we're running or that we're a part of and provide you tons of information there. So please reach out. Let us know if you're going to be there. We love to meet up, talk about all things, and just be a community together, which is great. So Jeff, are you ready for me to turn this over to you and all things?
I will. Thank you very much, and thanks for that great introduction there. It looks like Monique is going to be able to get to 1K, no problem this year
Nice.
with all the travel. It's pretty amazing how many places and how many people we're able to connect with now, not only just sort of here in the US and North America, but internationally as well with pods. So most everywhere I go these days, we're talking about pods, we're talking about modernization of the system of record. And, I think as we were starting to put this podcast together, it actually took me a little while to sort of come up with an idea. Because I was like, well, we can talk about technology again. We can talk about APR, utility network, and analytics and all those things. But I was like, what are people really struggling with? And I think the thing that's pretty universal out there is when we start looking at these projects and either implementing pods for the first time or modernizing a pods implementation, maybe upgrading from pods 4.0 relation tool to 7.0, it is really the cost, right? And not only what things cost, but how to go and get that money from management, from the CIO or the CTO to kind of fund these projects. And I think, we're all GIS people, we're all sort of GIS geeks, and we love talking about the technology and we love getting our hands on the technology, but we're not all really that great at communicating the value and dollars and cents of how these systems really impact the organization. And honestly, if you're in front of your CIO or your CTO and you're mentioning the word GUID or feature class or APR, you've probably already lost that argument, right? That's not the conversation that C-suite is looking for. They're really looking for what is my return on investment. And to that point, that's what we want to talk about today is how do we quantify that? What are some ways that we look for value? How do we quantify that value? And then how do we communicate that back effectively and then keep communicating that over time? Because this is the one thing that we've seen in really successful organizations is they do a really good job technically, and they do a really good job of marketing internally their GIS and their efforts to the rest of the organization around the value that they bring. Right. And I think that's the really important part. So when I put the slide deck together, this is new content. I didn't have these slides a couple weeks ago. So I really sat down and I kind of took a lot of things that I had learned and I had seen from different presentations from other operators and other folks at Esri, and I kind of put it in a pipeline context. And that's what I want to kind of share with you today. And so really the goals for today are pretty simple. I want to communicate to you what the components of an ROI look like. What are the approaches to quantifying those benefits? How do we go about this? And then how do we communicate that to leadership? Right. If I could leave you with those three things today, I would feel that this was very successful because I think, conveying to your leadership confidence in the investment that they're about to make is probably one of the hardest things we do. Right. Technically, we're really solid. Like we can list off the technical benefits. We can kind of go through all those things that we know we need. But really, when somebody comes to you and says, why does this cost X amount of dollars to do? How do we then communicate why we want to spend these dollars? And kind of to that first slide that we had, you are in a sense competing or having to sell your project because there are other projects also competing for a finite set of resources. And those projects that can demonstrate very effectively what their return on investment is going to be are going to be the projects that are most likely to be funded. Right. And that's what we want to kind of teach you today is some of those techniques of how to do that so that you can effectively communicate that to your leadership and get these projects funded. Now, from a business context, I think one of the things that we somehow, or some in the past have gotten, I would say, a little bit lazy about with GIS and PODS and pipeline data management is that we just simply throw up our hands and say, well, we have to do it. It's regulatory, right? We can't avoid it. Whatever the cost is, we have to do it. And in a sense, that's true, right? That is the GIS, the PODS database, your investment in those technologies plays a critical role in pipeline integrity. It cannot be overstated. But to the extent that those dollars are being spent to do that, to check that box, is really where we come down to it, right? Because you can make the argument that doing things like we used to do it with CAD drawings or alignment sheets or even Excel spreadsheets, they were things that we could do all the things about pipeline integrity, but they were more expensive, right? So that's what we're trying to communicate is like what we're doing now, yes, costs an investment, but there's a speed and a value here that goes beyond the way we just used to do it. And then we have this whole set of emerging pressures that most organizations are starting to face that we can help solve with PODS and GIS, right? Modernizing systems, adopting the web, moving to data centers that are in the cloud, market competition. Almost every day I open up my email, I see that one of my customers has been acquired or divested assets to another customer, right? So how do we convey that? How do we convey that, or how do we use GIS in that market competition land space beyond pipeline integrity? How do we minimize cost? And most companies are now looking at their sustainability options as well, right? We see a huge influx in seeing investment in, say, CO2 or blue hydrogen pipelines, right? Is that part of your business? I would say it probably is in a lot of cases, but might not be just part of your normal operations group. So there's another group out there that's maybe not using or tapping in to PODS or GIS to do route planning and prediction and things like that, but they are potential users and potential ways that you can get more return on investment for the infrastructure you've already put in place by kind of leveraging other groups outside of our normal pipeline integrity kind of use cases. And the other thing that I think is really important around this ROI conversation is sort of aligning what we're trying to do with the technology with our overall corporate strategy. So every year, most CIOs or CTOs will come out and say, "Hey, this is at a high level what we're doing for as a corporation," right? And so we always want to make sure that what we're doing on a very tactical scale is in alignment with that corporate strategy, or we can draw a direct correlation between the two. Because being able to demonstrate that supports our budget approvals and it justifies that continued investment in the GIS and the PODS investment that we're making, right? And then we also want to be very careful about this idea of short-term gains versus long-term impacts, this idea of something that's very tactical versus something that has a larger strategic value. So let me give an example. Something that's very tactical is saying, hey, we need to modernize our GIS because ArcGIS Desktop is going away and we need to move to Pro. And because of that, we need to upgrade our GIS database. That's a very tactical thing, right? It may have some longer term impacts, but aren't obvious. Something that has strategic value is something that we can show, hey, if we make this investment, then this is how it's going to gain advantages to us over the next 2, 3 to 5 years, right? And we're going to take credit for all those advantages in this ROI calculation. So we want to make sure that, we don't just think of the easy, tactical is, I think, low-hanging fruit. Like we have to do this, and that's I don't want to think about it any harder than that because it's a very, very short-term thing. But when we communicate and we get that audience with the decision makers, the people that hold the purse strings, we want to be able to set this longer term vision because that's going to resonate more when we get to those budget approvals and justifications. So we've been talking about ROI. We've been talking about it. What is ROI? Like it is a basic formula, right? It doesn't have to be something that's super complicated. It basically takes your benefits, divides them by your cost, your investment in the technology, and then comes up with a percentage, right? So if I had, say, $100 of benefits over $200 in cost, I have a 50% ROI. Most of the things that we do with GIS and most of the things we do with pods, that ROI is going to be very high, hundreds of percentages when we take all those net benefits and line them up over what the initial cost is. And this is something that's used throughout the financial industry, right? This isn't something that just is related to GIS or to pipeline. This is something that every industry does. But there are some very specific things that we want to think about around technology investments, right? Because you've got people, you've got the software cost, you've got the hardware cost, you've got hard costs or hard savings and soft savings, right? And all those are very specific to this data management workflow. We're going to kind of take you through some of those things. And again, these high performing businesses are successful because they are very cautious around where they put their investments. Right? They're just not going to give you a pile of money to go do some cool technology project. We have to define it because those dollars are competing against other things that the organization is trying to do. So I mentioned this in the last slide. There are two very kind of big buckets that we think about when we think about trying to define the net benefits in an ROI calculation. There's these hard quantifiable savings, right? I can reduce my labor cost. I have fewer data errors. I can reduce the rework. I can avoid penalties for not being in compliance. I can turn projects around faster. These are things that we can actually very easily put dollar values to. And I think one of the things that I've always seen in my past is that people are very cautious about this labor costs, right? They say, oh, if we put the GIS system in, we need less people. It's generally not the case, right? What we're generally saying about labor costs specifically is that we can take these very valuable assets, say our GIS professionals, and by automation and making things a little easier to do and putting things together in a certain way within the system, that we can allocate these highly valuable resources to highly valuable work. Right? There's no reason that we have to take somebody that's a seasoned GIS professional with 15 years of experience and having them do some type of basic GIS analysis or basic data entry, right? We want to make sure that those people are able to do other things. The thing that I find in most organizations that is their bottleneck is not actually getting the money from the budget, it's getting the time to do the work. And we have lots of opportunities. There's people lined up outside the door looking for things to do with GIS, but we're just bogged down in the work, right? So we need to figure out how to move that around so we can free up our time and use it the best based on that skill level. Now, the other thing we have is these soft benefits. right? How do you put a dollar around improving decision making or enhance collaboration, right? These are the ones that they fall into the equation. You should definitely take credit for them. You should try to put a dollar a value around them. But if you only focus on the soft benefits, because they're kind of nebulous and they're easy to list off, you're really not going to resonate with your management, right? You need to have both hard savings and these intangibles kind of put together in the same list. And I'll show you how to kind of go find these inside your organization and how you might quantify and if it's a hard savings or a soft savings as we kind of work through some of the different use cases. So where do we look, right? So if we're going to go find these cost savings within the organization, there's a kind of a formula to it, right? There's different ways that we can look at how we save things, and we have to kind of put each project in a different lens, right? There's cost removal. So example, would this be, if I have something that I had previously purchased externally that maybe I can build in-house, right? This is the idea of build versus buy. Now we see a lot of organizations, actually this is flipped around now because the technology is much easier to go buy than it was to build. Because now organizations are realizing that, yeah, this was fun to build, but it's not really fun to maintain, right? And if I can have, let's just take a great example, a class location tool. Everybody can sit down and create a sliding mile calculation. But then you run into, okay, clustering and different rules and how to customize it. And then new regulatory or rules come out or changes are being made to the regulations. And you're like, oh, we need to update that thing that we built, but Bob's no longer here. Like, what is the cost of having to relearn what Bob built and then rebuild it versus going to the marketplace, seeing if something exists and really pulling in from those Esri partners these tools that I can remove. So we have to look at cost removal in both ways, and it's build versus buy, and we always want to analyze that. And every time that we do an upgrade project is a great time to go relook at that tool set, right? Because as you modernize, it might be easier now to build something like a dashboard that you had to go out to an external partner to customize, or it might be able to now buy something from a partner because it's just a plug and play into a standard data model, right? Revenue growth, this is all about, how to help the organization with their competitive advantage, right? So we want to really think about what is the organization doing to generate revenue. Most pipelines, it's moving product through that pipeline. How can we help that part of the organization achieve that goal? And this might not be a regulatory thing. It might not be a detailed MAOP analysis, but if I can enable my my group that's going after to find new pipeline purchases or build new pipelines, if I can enable them with geospatial technology, open them up to say everything that's in the Esri Living Atlas, or show them exactly where all our meters are for all our customers, and give them a simple web app to go access that, I can help and take advantage of help growing that revenue. And that's going to come back into my ROI calculation for GIS. Data optimization, we see a lot of customers now either getting out of data centers that they built internally, moving to the cloud, moving to different cloud database platforms. All of those things are ways to reduce spend, right? Now, obviously, as we modernize GIS, oftentimes we need more resources than we had, right? So this kind of goes in both directions, but there are advantages here of looking at an optimization within the organization or within your infrastructure to look for ROI and be able to take credit for that. As we modernize the GIS, as we move forward, we're often look at decommissioning or combining applications. The older technology, we might have been forced down a one decision path on our technology. Is there a way that we can consolidate apps and remove applications from the stack? Or again, back to that kind of cost removal, go buy something and decommission these older applications. When we do that, it's not just a modernization project. It's not just a cost component of that decommissioning. We want to be able to take credit for what was the care and feeding for that old application, because that goes into our ROI, because yes, we have a cost perspective, but we also have a savings there that we need to realize. Resourcing efficiencies. This is all about optimization and workflows, things like workflow manager and arcade scripting and all the things that we can do at GIS that really increase efficiencies. And this is a really hard thing to do, especially during a project, because we think about all the moving parts of, say, modernizing a GIS or putting a new technology in place. There's a lot to do, but you really need to sit down with your end users and really look at their workflows. You sit over their shoulders, look how many button clicks they're doing, look for repetitive ways that we can optimize, because those are all ways that we can take advantage or take credit for resource optimization as we move forward. Oftentimes we modernize. I always tell people, nobody likes change. The only change you like is change in your pocket. And so there's going to be this normal pushback for change, but we want to make sure that those data editors and the people that are accessing the data understand the new capabilities we're giving them. So it's not a like for like replacement, and how that we can make them more efficient. And the last one we can look for is cost avoidance, right? So maybe this is simply like through avoiding something like regulatory fines or other ways that we can that costs might come into the equation, that we can take advantage of those in our ROI calculations. So as we look into those buckets, I'm going to give you some very specific examples of how we look at this, right? Risk mitigation. I started this conversation by saying, hey, risk is part of a major factor of why we put these systems in place. So it is the natural place to go see where my ROI is coming from, right? So what is the cost savings of an incident, or what is the cost of an incident versus productive risk management, right? This is where you can really, some of these are soft, because you say, okay, well, what is the cost of that incident? But there is a value there that you can put against your GIS to say, hey, if we do this, we are more likely to avoid this type of incident along our pipeline. And you should take advantage of that and take that into your ROI calculations. There's also kind of hidden ROI here, avoiding downtime, right? So a lot of customers say, hey, we've had this GIS system for a while and it's been on a single server and it's worked fine, but now we've got all these groups hitting that server. Now it has to be highly available, it has to be scalable, it has to be performant, right? That's a cost perspective, right? And we think about that as a cost, like, oh man, we have to buy 10 more servers and we have to buy more hardware and more software. But there's also an ROI built into that by avoiding downtime. And I often tell people, can you imagine a day in your desk without Outlook? 20 minutes and I would be going crazy, right? Do that same math in your mental math in your head and say, show me a day within the organization where nobody has access to maps anymore. Right. I would venture to guess that not having access or not having visibility into where the pipelines are for a whole day within your organization, you're going to have a lot of angry customers calling you up, right? So this avoiding of downtime is a cost to make sure the systems are scalable, but also gives you ability to take advantage of that in your ROI calculations. And then the other one is regulatory noncompliance, right? And we see this in a couple of different ways. I often say when we sit down, the audits that I've been participating in that have gone the best is when we can sit there with the auditor, have the GIS on the screen, and the auditor says, show me this HCA, show me the report, show me the field inspection. And we have everything in one system, and we're simply just clicking on buttons and pulling up data, and eventually they're like, yeah, okay, this matches your operating procedure. I see you guys have all this data integrated. It's easy to access. They're going to go looking for other things. Where we see customers really get into trouble is when they start asking questions, and I call it the scramble, right? You're in the conference room, you see people running back and forth, trying to find a manual or trying to find a report or going into another system, because really the regulatory guys are saying, hey, listen, you have this procedure, but either you're not following it, or if you did have some type of incident or have to answer some questions, clearly you don't have this data at your fingertips, right? So there's a cost avoidance there, because you may or may not get a fine, but you're probably going to get some type of of action against you that is going to cost money to go do. And if you can avoid that, that is part of your ROI. Now, more on the softer side, this operational efficiencies, like what is the value of reducing errors in your data? And this is kind of a soft one because it's really hard to put your finger on, but you should be able to try to quantify that or at least bring this up in conversations when you're going to ask for additional dollars, right? Because anytime we have error in our data, it's unclear who is going to make incorrect decisions based on the data errors, right? The sort of twin to data errors is data completeness. Somebody goes, tries to run a report, tries to answer a question, and we don't have that field filled in for all the pipes, right? It's incomplete data. So data errors and data completeness, there's a value there to having those two things. This goes into the traceable, verifiable, and complete story that we've all been working on. TBC comes with a cost. TBC also has an ROI benefit to it. If everything is traceable, verifiable, complete, what is the value to the decision makers in the organization? The other part of this is time to information, right? So if I have all this pipeline data and I have easy access to it, what is the value of that to folks in my organization? Because one of the things that we often see with organizations that don't have really good data management or really good integration between their systems, right? Because this is not, GIS doesn't sit on an island its own. It really needs to be integrated with the other management systems, is when somebody sits down to do and ask a question of the system, what is the time it takes them to pull that information together, right? Because their time is valuable because they could be doing other things. And if it takes them 3 days to pull together a big Excel spreadsheet from 4 different systems, and you can help reduce that time, that should be credited to your ROI because you've taken that time away from what they have done, and that resource is now freed up to maybe answer a different question or answer multiple questions around the assets. And the other one is workflow automation, right? Reducing manual processes, reducing turnaround times on things. Anytime that we can efficiently move data into the system or edit data in a way that we took us, hours before to minutes, that's going to be a value to the organization. One of the things that we see here in this manual process, and one that often gets overlooked, is how does new data get into the system? How does a new as-built get loaded? Right. And we've seen for years that the project management team comes to GIS, drops off a banker box, CDs, disks, paper maps, and say, okay, here's everything that happened on the project. Now we need to load it into the GIS. Right. So there's a time to information problem there because the pipeline's flowing product and operations is happening. And you're now loading that into GIS. So they don't have access to that data. And if we can automate that workflow, then we're going to greatly reduce your time that you're spent putting that data into the GIS as well. Regulatory compliance. I think this is probably one that, every time I go and talk to an operator around, depending it's the June or January timeframe, everybody goes, hey, Jeff, yeah, this is great. I want to start this project, but after I get the audit reports done, right? After I get my annual reports finished, because it's going to take us 2 months to put this all together, right? If we can have that regulatory reporting easily flow throughout the system, that's going to greatly reduce the amount of time we spend doing that process. This comes back to data completeness. It comes back to data accuracy, right? You have to have complete and accurate data to feed into these reports, but also the process of producing the reports. There's a workflow, there's an automation that can happen there that can really take value and add value to the organization. And that really then flows into cost avoidance, right? If I can do those reports, my annual reports tie out, I can show that if I added or subtracted pipes from last year, everything ties out in my system, then there's no question if an auditor comes in and says, hey, this, why does your MPMS submission say this and your annual report says this? They don't match up. Oh, well, my annual report's coming from this team and my MPMS is coming from GIS and they don't match, right? That's a big red flag. So avoiding those types of issues as well is where we can gain value or gain credit value against our GIS investment. Then there's these performance and risk metrics as well. So, we all have this idea in our head, like it's 2 a.m., there's some type of incident along the pipeline. What is the value of having quick access to the data about that incident? One of the things that we've done at Esri most recently that a lot of people are interested in is having maps available in Teams. Because we all know when it hits the fan, where do we all go? We go to Teams, we go to Outlook. What if I could put a map right in that Teams chat? Say, here's where the problem is. Here's where the staging area is. Here's where the local hospital is, right? Those are all things that will help us if, God forbid, there is some type of incident response. I was talking to somebody once, they were late for a meeting and they came in, they go, yeah, sorry I'm late. There was just a sinkhole in the road and it's kind of near one of our pipelines. So I had to respond to this. It wasn't an emergency, it wasn't a failure, but he had gotten a photo from the field and it was like, hey, it's at Highway 101 and a picture, right? And that was great, but he's like, we crossed Highway 101 in 4 places. And I can't even really tell, is this person looking this way or this way? And I kind of showed him something really simple in field maps where I said, hey, did you know that you can enable this so that the photo actually drops a pin on the map and shows you where that photo was taken from? They're like, oh my God, this would have saved me so much time. It took him 2 hours just to figure out where the sinkhole was that he was trying to respond to. And so all that can be taken as, this efficiency in resolving problems and collaborating better, collaboration efficiencies. And then the other one here is predictive maintenance, right? And this is kind of one of the ones that I think was a little bit of a holy grail for the GIS, but can we then take all this data that we have, ILI, CIS, SCADA information, pipe, and predictively look at maintenance, right? And this doesn't mean it's just GIS on its own. We have to tie into other systems like SAP that might be having, or Maximo that might be having repair history and schedules to it. But these are all things that, if done correctly, there's a preventative maintenance problem that can be solved. And there's a value to the organization that should be credited in some portion against a GIS investment. And one of the other ones we want to look for too is this decision-making metrics, right? What is the value of having this quality data easily accessible? This is where we start thinking about dashboards, Power BI. There's been an explosion of people developing and building out Power BI dashboards for organizations that fuse together multiple data sources and have a GIS map embedded into them, right? Because this is what the organization is using to communicate value across the organization, even when it's not GIS. So there's 2 theories here. Take your users and bring them to the portal, or take your portal and bring it to the users. This is the second. We're taking the mapping components that you've had an investment in, and we're fusing or enabling location and these other platforms that are already using it. And companies are seeing huge value of that. The picture is worth 1,000 words. And these Power BI dashboards can now be enabled with spatial queries. So where in the past we had to go in and create complicated queries or prep the data a certain way, now we can start asking the system spatial questions through these dashboards and putting them in the hands of the normal user. And that enables people to make better decision making quicker. And that, again, is a place that you can then go and say, hey, without GIS investment, this is what this workflow would have entailed. This person would have gone to Google Maps, so they want to pull out a paper map, or gone to a wall map, or maybe they couldn't even solve the question without location involved. If they can, right, that is a value to the organization that you should take advantage of in that top line, that denominator of that calculation. So those are the kind of areas that we look for, right? So I wanted to put those all together because some of them are not super obvious. Some of them are pretty hard to qualify, but you should try. So how do we qualify? How do we actually start capturing this information? The best way to do it is by using surveys and user feedback. Don't be afraid to go to your user base and say, hey, now that you've had this tool, how much time do you think you saved from before to now? right? You want to quantify that. It's just not you as a GIS professional saying, well, I think this should be 10 hours savings, right? Those users, if they're truly using the system correctly, will be able to quantify that for you and bring that back. And it's way more valuable when you go in front of your management to say, hey, this saved this X amount of hours, because it's the operations manager that gave me that information versus, hey, I did this on the back of a napkin, so I think it's saving them. The other big way to do this is benchmarking, right? Within the industry, we're always open to sharing processes, sharing procedures, and I've seen a lot of good work being done where customers go out or operators go out and talks amongst each other, like, hey, how are you doing this process? It's like, oh wow, like they're either doing it way more efficiently, gives you ideas to increase ROI, or you find out that your process is actually pretty good and you want to take advantage of that and put that into your ROI calculation, right? And that benchmarking is, I always say the pipeline industry is very herd mentality. I often be sitting in a meeting and saying, hey, well, I think we should do this. And you go, who else is doing it? Who else can I talk to? And we're often connecting operators. And I think that's really one of the big values of pods, beyond just being a data model. It's a collection of people who are struggling with the same problems and trying to do the same thing and come together and collectively share experiences that you can all take back. And this benchmarking and be able to benchmark against each other, I think is a huge advantage of being a pods member. The other one is pilot programs, right? We always talk about pilot projects and things like that. And I think one of the things that we miss on pilot programs is we think about the technology first. And I'm not saying that's not a major driver of a pilot project. Does the thing I'm trying to do actually work? But part of the pilot project should be to record what those measurable improvements are before you go to full scale, right? Because you can take a pilot project and you can do a couple of workflows and go, whoa, these are all, go back to those slides and say, these are all the places where we're capturing value. Divide that by the cost of the project and say, hey, I think by upgrading or putting in this new process or changing the way we used to do it is going to be 150% ROI. Like that will get noticed, right? Because you're no longer asking for money from a cost perspective. You're actually going in and justifying your project as a value to the company, as a plus, not a subtract, right? And that's a whole different conversation. You'll get a way different sort of involvement from your C-suite when you start talking around those metrics, and not just a cost perspective, but a value perspective, and putting real numbers on paper. Not just going in and saying, yeah, I think this is going to save us money. Going and saying, this is going to save us this amount of money, right? Very specifically. So let me give you an example of how this might happen. Like here's a case study of an operational efficiency gain, right? This is one very specific part of that process. So before, each team, each department kept their own separate spreadsheet. The integrity guys, the maintenance guys, the operation guys, all working on separate spreadsheets or separate databases, and they all had different line names or different pipeline segmentation or different pipeline names. And so at some point, somebody needs to look at all this data together. So what happens? We spend a ton of time trying to fuse data together about the inspections, the assets, what's going on, the pipeline system. And this leads to a lot of work, and it leads to a lot of inefficiencies and potential data errors, right? And every time we do this, every time something changes in one of these systems, we have to redo this. So what's it look like after we were to tie these three things together? Maybe we put some of this information in pods, maybe we integrate with another system like Maximo or SAP to get this done. But we end up building a single source of the truth. And you've heard me talk about this before, but this goes right to an ROI calculation. Having a single source of the truth allows us to reduce the time it takes to put that information together. And if I look at the efficiency gains, I've got reduced errors. I've got less confusion about which data set is correct. No, my line name's right. You're wrong, blah, blah, blah. I remove that confusion. I remove all that time spent trying to sort that out. I potentially have fewer systems to license and maintain. So there's a hard value here if I kind of combine these things. We had an operator that had 20 systems all tied together and system of data everywhere. And we said, okay, there should be really three: the GIS, in their case, SAP, a document management system. Those were the repositories for system of record information, and everything else pulled from those systems, right? So fewer systems to maintain, fewer lines to maintain between systems. There's an admin cost and a storage cost there that you can take advantage of. Streamlining the workflow, right? The team spent less time reconciling inconsistencies. There's a time component here. And then faster updates. So when we need to do this again, right, we weren't having to go back and resynchronize and refix all these multiple systems to bring them together. So this is one example of how I would take what I showed in those previous slides, like four different very specific things, quantify them, use that against my cost of the system to come up with what the value of that is. So once I understand the value, once I've gone out, did my due diligence, pulled all this together, find out where all my values are, quantify them, then you really want to start kind of targeting and tailoring your message, right? Just having the information is one thing. Be able to effectively communicate that message to your leadership is a whole nother ballgame, right? So when we do that, we want to really focus not on the technology, right? We can have a technology conversation any moment, but we really want to have a conversation about the financial benefits and risk reduction to the organization, right? Those are going to resonate with the non-GIS professionals in your organization. And we also want to go out and target those business line managers, right? Because they're also having to fight for resources, and not just GIS group, but operations, integrity, right away. They're all battling for the same pool of money operationally. So we want to partner with those managers and say, hey, if we do this for you, you can also take advantage of this in your conversations with your executives. Say, hey, I've done this. I've put in my sweat equity to the program, and I've seen this efficiency gain for my department as well. And we can kind of start tying those together and fit those together. And then really we want to be able to show that in some type of story, right? So whether it be PowerPoint or visual aids or reports, how do we quantify this and show it to the organization, right? ArcGIS dashboards is a great way to do this, Power BI, but we want to collect this information, not about the assets themselves, but about the efficiency gains, so we can then promote this within the organization. This also comes down to really highlighting the before and after comparisons, right? We used to do it this way. We put this process in place, and now here's the efficiency gain. And I can show you a dashboard that shows how this is actually happening in the new organization. And that all goes down to kind of understanding what these key performance indicators are. Like, what are you actually trying to measure? And not just do it once, but continue to collect that information over time and build up that use case. Because there's nothing better than walk in to go and get your next project to have a whole ROI story already mapped out of what you've been doing with the last project over the last 2 years. That's going to make that funding for that improvement on the next upgrade or the next edition or the next thing way easier as we move forward. Now, the other thing is when we make these presentations, and as a sort of a sales professional, we actually get trained in this, is overcoming objections, right? No one's just going to sit back in a meeting and say, hey, tap on the shoulder and say, great job, you nailed it. Everybody's going to ask questions, right? You have to be willing to take that sort of that feedback from those executives and be able to overcome those objections. And the way we do that is really having good trackable results, hard quality data, right? Sometimes the soft costs or soft analysis are harder to do, but on the hard costs, we should have that nailed down. We should have a process to show that, and we should have a process to collect it. And then again, kind of coming back to that, linking it to the benefit of the corporate goals. Those guys are looking at it holistically across the organization. We want to show how PODS and GIS directly benefits what the organizational goals are, right? And not just in a single bucket, but like we're helping the bigger picture move forward, what we're trying to do as an organization. And then having this continuous improvement cycle. This isn't a thing we do once, right? I mean, you can do it once, you can do it for a project and you can put it on the shelf, but the ones that we've seen very successful in this area make it part of their corporate culture. Every project has to justify itself. And when you get into that mentality and you know how to spot the value, or you know what you're looking for, and there's more of a programmatic approach to it, as you enter the new project, you're not looking at a blank piece of paper. You've got a process, and you want to continue to update that process as you go along. Because once the project is finished, you don't want to stop tracking the ROI, because you want to show that that investment in GIS for this project is going to be your baseline. It's going to be your shining star to show to the management, hey, remember last year when I asked for this? Here's what we did with that. So when I asked for this, there's some history here, there's some value that you've already demonstrated that you know how to do this, how to capture this value, and that what you're presenting is sort of a repeat of what you've done, right? And that helps you with that process. And then this other idea of, kind of as you go forward, building this base for ongoing improvement. We all know these systems don't stay around for more than 3 to 5 years. They always need some type of improvement. So don't stop looking for value when you finish implementing the project, because you've gotten the money, we've done the project, everybody slaps themselves on the back and we go look for something else. Remember that process or that program that you put in place probably has more ROI to squeeze out of it, right? It's not just, we don't get it perfect day one. And two, we want to continue to monitor the ROI of that project. So when that project comes up for renewal, whether it's just be maintenance renewal or we need to add to it or we need to do the next upgrade, we can point back to the work we did before and say, hey, if we did 1,000% ROI last time, we think we're going to get this. And here's the metrics to prove it. So here's what I wanted you to take away from today. Get started with measuring your ROI, right? Identify those key performance indicators, set some measurable goals. Even if you're not being asked for it today, it's good practice, because eventually we all need to stand in front of a management and ask for more dollars for something, right? And if you don't have that information and you're starting from scratch, it's going to be hard to get those pilot project metrics or get those inputs from your business of what their time they're savings. This is just good business to be able to do. If you are already measuring your ROI, think about other ways, think about other value. Maybe there's more soft value out there. Maybe there's more hard costs you haven't taken advantage of, right? There's always a way to start thinking of the system in different ways that you can add that to your analytical tool. And then this is the ongoing process, right? We want to continue to monitor and adjust, because like I said, no project is ever perfect day one. We want to make sure that, hey, we think we've got a certain amount of value. If we're not getting that value, did we actually get it right? Are there other process improvements or other values? And oftentimes those things don't make themselves known to you until you're 2, 3, 4 months down the project and in production. And the user goes, why do I have to click this 5 times? Oh, well, we didn't really think about that in the project scope. Yeah, maybe we can do this and this. So there's always ways to kind of squeeze more ROI out of that thing. So not a technology presentation today, right? Is really kind of thinking more along the business. But this is a valuable exercise to go through, because if you're not thinking about it from a business perspective, you're only thinking about it from a technology and cost perspective, you're going to get a harder time trying to do what you're trying to do, right? This makes your job easier because it helps you get the funding you need to do all the cool things. So talk about GUIDs, talk about utility network, to talk about APR, talk about geodatabases. These are all things that we love to do. But if funding is being redirected to some other process, we're not going to be able to do it, or we're going to be understaffed, right? So that's why I think this is kind of an important takeaway of how we do this in GIS and how we quantify these investments. So if anybody has any further thoughts or things they'd like to talk about on the subject, happy to do it. But my first run through this presentation live, so I hope it had value for you guys. I hope it got you thinking along a couple different lines, and hope that from an educational perspective, somebody was able to bring a couple nuggets away from this presentation today.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. I see we're getting some thumbs ups and claps. That's great digitally to see popping up on the screen. I have, opened up the Q&A, and I see also, I'll check over on the chat right now. making sure we have everything. So just a thanks, Jeff. It's an excellent presentation. So you're getting some good praise. If you have a question right now, now's the time to drop that in that chat. Or Jeff, if people want to talk to you further or reach out to you, I would assume LinkedIn is great. And how
Yep,
else to get a hold?
the QR code on the screen will take you right to my LinkedIn profile or Jeff_Allen@Esri.com anytime.
And what's the next event that people might be able to catch you at?
The next event will be Urgis, right? So we are deep into Urgis planning at this point. We've got a really strong pipeline track, probably the strongest I've seen since I've been here at Esri. And right now we're working on what I think is going to be a phenomenal plenary presentation as well, with lots of pipeline stuff in it. So that's the next big event for us that we'll be at, and love to continue the conversation there for those of you who can attend.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And I've dropped into the chat and the Q&A registration for the Pod Spring Forum. That, of course, is
Fantastic.
April 28th with things, also the next podcast with Petro IT. So please, everyone, just keep being involved, keep being awesome. Let us know how pods can serve you, as I'm always completely humbled by just the availability of what people do with their time, such as Jeff. So Jeff, thank you as always. We look forward to the future with you and to continue
Happy to
learning
do
from
it.
you as well.
Cool. Thank you very much.
All right.
And thanks,
Have a
everybody.
blessed day, everyone.
Thanks.
It says ending event for the